Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Our division previews continue. You know, the AFC North is going to be on the Hard Knocks this year, the entire division. And we're giving you a preview of that today. Andrew DiCecco is back with our division previews of maybe, Andrew, the best division in all of football. All four teams had a winning record last year. Baltimore 13-4, Cleveland 11-6, Pittsburgh 10-7, and Cincinnati 9-8. Is this the best division for your money in football this season?
Hey, Mike, how are you?
All is good, my brother?
I would say probably so. I've long liked this division because of its sort of physicality, the rivalry there. While some of the teams have never been relevant consistently, I think that they always have a competitiveness against one another. So it's always really fun to watch those two teams match up, especially anytime the Ravens play. I always like the Ravens, the force teams to match their physicality.
Yeah, black and blue, Ravens, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, who had always kind of been the outsider. They started to, turn their program around. So they've added the intrigue to this one. Let's start with Baltimore at the top of the list. Generally, they have been the leaders in the clubhouse. 13-4 last year. As we take a look at the division previews, we kind of give a quick little overview of the offense, defense, some additions to draft picks. They had a big addition on offense. Let's start with Derrick Henry. Andrew, how do you think Derrick Henry fits into Baltimore?
Well, he's the prototypical Ravens running back. He's a between-the-tackles grinder who is going to give teams fits when he gets downhill. He's going to rack up a ton of touchdowns. I think that he has probably one good season left in him. He's taken a lot of hits and wears on players, but he's sort of built to withstand a lot of that, which is why I think you're seeing him be productive even as he's getting up there in age. So he's, to me, is going to be a key addition, if not the key addition, to the AFC North in terms of giving an advantage.
Yeah, they've had – what has been their problem? Why can this offense not get over the hump come playoff time, and does Derrick Henry fix that?
Well, I don't know that their receiving core has been good enough. I don't know if they elevate to the standard that needs to be when you reach the postseason. There's been drops. There's just been sometimes their shortcomings just surface. They're not able to get open with regularity. And also Lamar Jackson. Let's be frank here. Lamar Jackson hasn't been at his best in the postseason at all times. So sometimes the offense kind of disappoints when all things aren't firing on all cylinders. And the quarterback has to be better, but I think the surrounding talent around him needs to as well, which is why I think Derrick Henry is going to play a big part here, especially as it gets colder. You can lean on the running game, alleviate some of the pressure from Lamar Jackson, and allow your offense to kind of do what it does, which I think it's going to run through Derrick Henry this year.
All right, Andrew, you take a look at that. What's receiving cores? Flowers, Bateman. They added. They have Aguilar, Mark Andrews. So, do we like this receiving core now more because they have Derrick Henry?
I like Zay Flowers a lot. I like him coming out. I think he's a good route runner. He's good after the catch, physical after the catch. I don't know that he's a number one, but he's sort of being cast as such. Rashad Bateman's a player who never really lived up to expectations. He's someone that I had really high expectations for personally when he was coming out of the draft, and through injuries and just inconsistency, he hasn't been that guy. I thought he was going to be their top receiver, and he's built to be a number one, but he hasn't been able to kind of take that mantle. And then Nelson Aguilar is a very consistent player in that offense. When I heard Eric DaCosta, their general manager, speak at the NFL Scouting Combine, one of the things that he made sure that he got across was how valuable Nelson Aguilar is to that offense and to their franchise in general, just being around the locker room. I like his personality. There's trust there between Lamar Jackson and Aguilar. So he's kind of an underrated player in that offense, but he's someone that I think will greatly aid over the short to intermediate levels of the field.
Yeah, they went and kind of brought guys back to that team. Van Noy on defense, Matabuke on defense, Malik Harrison on defense. They're kind of running it back a little bit here. Dalvin Cook a guy that they had last year. So they're kind of getting past, the big name guy there, and they're going with Henry, obviously, as the running back, because a lot of people thought that would have been a little shot in the arm for them. But see, a new look on the offense, but it's always defense in Baltimore, and this is a defense that still is loaded with talent. A lot of people love Kyle Hamilton. You got Humphrey. I'm a big fan of Van Noy. I feel like he's an underrated kind of guy. Roquan Smith is here. This defense, if they're going to win a Super Bowl, they have the talent on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and you didn't mention my favorite player on that defense, Justin Matabuke, tremendous defensive lineman, really good short area quickness, twitchy, has some power to him, and I think that he's going to take the next step forward, which, if you can believe that, I thought last season he was pretty dominant, but I think now he's going to become much more of a household name. And obviously you mentioned Roquan Smith. They drafted Nate Wiggins in the first round, the corner from Clemson. Marlon Humphrey's there. I think Brandon Stevens is a tremendously underrated defensive back. Thought he took a really big step under Denard Wilson, the former Eagles defensive backs coach, who really was able to tap into his ability. So they have a lot of pieces there that I like.
All right. And by the way, Nate Wiggins was the pick in the draft for them. Roger Rosengartner, also an offensive tackle that you might get some playing time there. That was their draft class. But 13-4, the Ravens, we took a look at them, the winners of the North last year. They were followed up by Cleveland, who went to the playoffs with Joe Flacco. A lot of people, Andrew, like this roster, but they don't love the quarterback. What say you about where this quarterback is now in kind of the strange road he has taken to Cleveland?
Yeah, it has been a strange road. This will ultimately be the telltale year, in my estimation, for what Deshaun Watson is at this stage of his career, because last season you could say was sort of an adjustment period, shaking off the rust, and now there's really no excuse. You've been in the system for enough time to develop a rapport with your playmakers. You are being heavily compensated, and they're looking to you to be the franchise quarterback. So there's no acclimation period anymore. You're entrenched in that role. It's time to put up or shut up. And I think it'll be middling. I think they're going to ride off that defense mostly, but I think there'll be a team that's relevant throughout the season just because of how balanced they are, more or less, offense and defense. But they have one of the better defenses in the NFL, which, of course, is overseen by Jim Schwartz, former Eagles defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I know a lot of people looking at Watson. If you get to the playoffs with Flacco, Watson needs to follow that up by getting there. But overall, a lot of these offseason lists, it's list season, as we know, Andrew. Cleveland, a lot of people put their roster, their total 53, as like a top 5 to 7 roster in the NFL. Do you look at them on that level?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do any rankings. I don't really fool with that. But, I view them as a preeminent team in the NFL going into the season, at least on paper. And when you look at their defense, Mike, Myles Garrett, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better defensive lineman with overall traits and impact than Myles Garrett. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker, who I like, and I thought that the Eagles might take a look at him when he slipped in the draft a little bit there a few years ago. They drafted defensive tackle Mike Hall in the second round, so they have some depth there and a player that they can develop. Jordan Hicks, the former Eagle, is there at linebacker. Their secondary, I really like. They have a ton of young players, including Martin Emerson, who might be my favorite player on their back end. Grant Delpit's a really good young, effective safety. Denzel Ward's a really good corner as well. And I haven't even mentioned Greg Newsome, and I'm sure there's other players that I'm forgetting. But, yeah, I mean, they have a really young secondary that they've quietly added pieces over the years, and they really gel together. They're able to keep that nucleus intact, and I think you're going to see a really cohesive unit as a result.
Yeah, no, they really talented defense. You mentioned Garrett, obviously, but all around him, they're just loaded with depth and talent on that defensive side of the ball. Really good roster in which Deshaun Watson, he's got Cooper, and now they added Jerry Jeudy in the offseason as well. Nick Chubb should be back and healthy. He had a tough injury to come back from, but we'll see what Cleveland looks like. They finished second in the AFC North last year. Let's go to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has not had a losing record in the entire Tomlin era there. They went 10-7. They made the playoffs, but Andrew, big change, the quarterback position. It's now a Russell Wilson, and Justin Fields looms as well, replacing Kenny Pickett. What do we think about the change in quarterback and what that might do for a 10-win team in Pittsburgh last year?
Well, they certainly have the names, but they were both available for a reason, and this summer is going to be a tightly contested battle, I would imagine. If I were the Steelers, I would probably give the nod to Justin Fields just based on upside. I think he has a substantially better arm and also gives you the different dimension to be able to move around the pocket and things like that. Yes, Russell Wilson can do that as well, but he's getting a little bit older. There's been there's been a drastic decline in his play, and I think Justin Fields ultimately gives you a higher ceiling offensively. But I'm a big George Pickens guy. I think with better quarterback play, he's going to be able to reach his potential. You didn't really get to see that as much. You saw flashes, but not the dominance that a player of his caliber really should have been able to exude. Van Jefferson's he's really a possession guy. He works the middle of the field, really good route runner, former University of Florida wide receiver. And they drafted Roman Wilson, who's a player that I really like coming out of the draft, wide receiver from Michigan in the third round. A little bit smaller, so he's more of your slot guy. But I love his short area quickness. He's tough after the catch. He kind of gives them a new dimension at that position than they don't already have. So they have some good weapons there. And then Pat Freiermuth is a player, their tight end, former Penn State tight end, that I think is going to take a pretty big jump forward here, especially as the quarterback play and the offense around him improves. But you'd be hard-pressed to find a better offensive line than what the Steelers have really been able to put together. They drafted Troy Fautanu, the right tackle, in the first round. Broderick Jones, the left tackle, he's already there. He's entrenched and a pretty accomplished player. Sayamalu is their left guard. Eagles fans are very familiar with him. And they also drafted center Zach Frazier in the second round. So they have a lot of young pieces blending in with ascending talent in that area.
I tell you, you brought up the offensive line. I was going to bring it up, as you mentioned, Fautanu and Zach Frazier. They drafted him in the first two rounds. Sayamala already there. Broderick Jones, really good offensive line. If they can get elevated quarterback play, this team won 10 games last year. And one of the reasons when they won 10 games, they got a really good defense. T.J. Watt is the name. Patrick Queen is now here as well. Joey Porter Jr., who they drafted a year ago. Minkah Fitzpatrick, they made that trade. This defense is really good.
Yeah, my guy Alex Highsmith, who I've been pretty high on ever since that draft and seeing him at the East West Shrine Bowl. They can really apply pressure. You mentioned T.J. Watt. Between him and Alex Highsmith, that's one of the better pass rush tandems in the NFL. Keanu Benton he's a defensive lineman from Wisconsin, a player who was a fast riser a season ago, and the Steelers were able to pounce on him. I love his game. Really, he plays with really good leverage, powerful, has some burst and athleticism to him. So I think that this year he's going to really be that centerpiece on that defensive line. And you mentioned Patrick Queen. I think Patrick Queen is going to be you mentioned Derrick Henry for the Ravens. I think that defensively, that's probably going to prove to be one of the better additions in the NFL. I think that he's going to be able to have a pretty big impact on that defense at that second level.
There we go. That's a team that won 10 games last year, and I think people looked at them and said, man, how are they winning 10 games? Do you look at this team, though, as a playoff team this time around? They made the playoffs last year. Are they better than the team that went 10-7 last year?
On paper, yeah, they are. They need some things to break in their favor. Look, the division around the teams around them got better as well. So it all depends on what kind of quarterback play they're going to get, who's going to emerge and rise to the top, and are they going to be consistent? Both players are polarizing for different reasons. I think with Justin Fields, you want to see how he is when he has more talent around him and more structure. I think Mike Tomlin's a phenomenal head coach, probably my favorite in the NFL, has a long-standing history of success and consistency. And I think having that should be able to provide some stability for Justin Fields. And then really Russell Wilson is polarizing because his career is in a tailspin. And this is his, by all accounts, would be his final opportunity to really reclaim a starting role in this league and sort of rewrite the script on his career.
That won't be interesting. I kind of agree with you. I'm intrigued by Fields there. I know Wilson is the veteran guy, but I thought Justin Fields – I think he has the opportunity to be a pretty good player in this league still. I know Chicago kind of moved on from them because they were kind of forced into it, having the number one pick. I don't know if they make that decision if they didn't end up with the number one pick going 7-10 last year. But, hey, now you got a quarterback situation in Pittsburgh. Wilson, Fields, really good team. I like that Pittsburgh team as kind of an under-the-radar team. And then we go to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati, as Bill Belichick once said. 9-8 the Bengals were last year. Obviously, a lot of injury problems with Joe Burrow. But what kind of team is he coming back to? You got a new running back there, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Mike Gesicki's the new tight end. Their problem has been offensive line. When you look at that offense for Joe Burrow, is it a step back from what he had the last couple seasons?
I don't know that I would say that. I like Orlando Brown at left tackle. Trent Brown's the right tackle, but they also drafted Amarius Mims in the first round from Georgia. Now, he's not a pro-ready guy. He is a project. He always started 8 games at Georgia, but I think the upside is immense. And if they're able to tap into that, he's able to kind of get on the field early, you're going to have a number of different linemen that are going to be able to step up and provide an impact and help Joe Burrow keep him upright, because that's ultimately going to be their that's going to be the determining factor in seeing if the Bengals can be able to live up to their expectations, because I had the Philadelphia Eagles and the Cincinnati Bengals facing off in the Super Bowl last year. And obviously, for different reasons, both their seasons went awry later. But I think that they've done some good things. Alex Kopp is there at right guard. Their running back situation is really interesting because no longer is Joe Mixon there. You have Zach Moss and you have Chase Brown. Chase Brown is the brother of Eagles safety Sidney Brown. I think he might be someone who takes that starting role sooner than later. I liked him at Illinois. I think he gives some juice and athleticism there out of the backfield. So that's something to watch as well.
I think Jermaine Burton, by the way, a sneaky pick by them from Alabama, going into that slot for them. That's a big explosive offense. Chris Jenkins, the defensive tackle for Cincinnati, they took in the second round because you look at that defense. Trey Hendrickson, obviously, big credentials there. Logan Wilson, Geno Stone has been there for a while. Sheldon Rankin. So you take a look at their defense and say
they just got Geno Stone in free agency.
Yep. They added Stone in free agency. So you wonder, does this defense have enough? A couple of years ago, it helped them get to that Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think they do. It's just a matter of what's the depth like, because I think from a starting standpoint, they do. I just have some questions in terms of depth. Looking at their headliners, Trey Hendrickson, who you mentioned, Chris Jenkins was drafted in the second round. I like their linebackers, Jermaine Pratt, and Logan Wilson's a player who I really like coming out of Wyoming. He's been a really good plug-and-play guy for them for a number of years now. And, Cam Taylor-Britt, the corner from Tennessee, who they drafted in the second round a couple of seasons ago. I like him a lot. Mike Hilton's a really consistent nickel player, one of the better ones in football. So they have some pieces there. But, look, this is going to be a tough division. It's interesting to see. I'll be interested to see how they stack up.
Yeah, I know that this division is going to be a lot of fun. They're going to be the in-season hard knocks this year. So you're going to get all 4 of these teams. And we'll ask Andrew his picks for the AFC North. I mean, you can almost fold up the papers and put them in a hat and start picking them out, and no one would probably question you on them. But how do you like the AFC North?
Oh, boy. I'm going to go, Mike. I'm going to go Ravens, Browns, Bengals, Steelers.
Wow. So Pittsburgh, 10-7, made the playoffs.
That wasn't an easy one, but as I was going through it, I think that all 4 teams, you can make a case for. I had a hard time putting them at 4, but I think a lot of it's going to come down to the quarterback play. And that caused me some trepidation there.
Yeah, I agree, man. I said you could put a dart and just throw and make a case for the way the dart's laid out there. While we have Andrew here, he has a couple pieces up right now over at InsideTheBirds.com. And one of the things you're writing about is the safety room, more questions than answers at safety. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things you're thinking to look at with that position? As, by the way, Andrew, training camp announced July 23rd. We're about a month away.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Mike. So when I was going through the roster and you look at where the Eagles are weakest, you can certainly make a case for wide receiver outside of A.J. Brown and Devontae. You can make a case for linebacker as well. But for me, I'm looking at safety, and the reason being is C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship. Yes, that makes a good tandem, but both players carry injury history to be mindful of. And the third player in this equation, Sidney Brown, by all accounts, is going to be ahead of schedule returning from his ACL, but you also have to factor in learning a new defense. How quickly is he going to be able to provide a boost? It's not an assured, scenario that he's going to be able to come right in and have that kind of impact. And then really beyond that, they're cross-training James Bradbury at safety, which we never got to see because he came up lame during individual drills on the first day of mandatory minicamp. So he's largely a projection. We don't even know if he's going to be on the roster. Avonte Maddox is cross-trained, but his primary role is nickel corner. So, I mean, it's kind of tough to bank on that. And then they have a number of young players in Tristan McComb and Mekhi Garner, who each played in 3 games last season, mostly on special teams, and they played in the playoff game. And then Andre Sam, the undrafted safety out of LSU, is a interesting player, a little bit older, but I think that his size and athleticism, he's only 5'10", 194, but he kind of moves around like a corner. I think he has some good range and fluidity, but again, there's it's an unknown entity there aside from the top 2 players, and even they, to a degree, carry a little bit of concern given their injury history.
All right. I know that that safety room, you're going to keep an eye on that, but you also wrote over at InsideTheBirds.com that you think the corner room might be the strength of this team.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite position to talk about, I've gotten to know a lot of these guys, so I kind of know how they operate, what they're really good at, and what maybe they need in their areas of improvement. But, I mean, Slay, I don't think he gets enough credit for how good and consistent he's been over his career, and he's their top corner. He's going to be a mentor for the younger players, which is something that he's always mentioned ever since I've gotten a chance to talk to him about getting, paying it forward, paving the way for the younger players. And I think with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean there, he'll be able to kind of get them set up for success. Obviously, why don't we lead? We'll go right into Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. Those are 2 players that I think could factor prominently early. Cooper DeJean could even be the starting nickel. I'm not so sure about Quinyon Mitchell starting week 1. It's a tough spot playing in Brazil as a rookie player, especially when you have players like Isaiah Rodgers, who has played in the NFL a lot. He's played a lot in the NFL. And Kelee Ringo, I thought, had a really good spring. Probably in my opinion, I thought he had the best spring, followed closely by Isaiah Rodgers. So either one of those guys right now would be my pick to start week 1. And then Eli Ricks and Josh Jobe are 2 players who were on the roster last season, combined for over 500 snaps and 3 starts. And they've been largely overshadowed because of the depth there and the players that they've added. So it's going to be a really interesting and closely contested battle throughout the summer that I can't wait to cover.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. You just kind of got my juices going for that because that corner room, I'll ask you this as we get you out of here, Andrew DiCecco. Check him out over at InsideTheBirds.com. All of his off-season coverage, getting you ready for training camp. James Bradbury, will he be on the team week 1?
I'm going to say no, but I don't know that it's a slam dunk. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there's value in keeping a player like James Bradbury around, Mike, who is obviously he's a quintessential professional, but I think having him there to sort of guide the younger players, but also maybe factor as a situational boost in terms of covering tight ends or in confined spaces like the red zone where you can use his length and football intelligence to factor into that. I think that he has some attributes that the Eagles or Vic Fangio in this case should be able to accentuate. Just a matter of, do you want him to take up a spot for a younger player that you may have to otherwise part with?
Very good stuff, man. I always appreciate it. And, of course, our division previews kind of give our listeners a little insight on all the opponents that are out there battling for the Super Bowl. And, of course, you can hear that with Andrew DiCecco here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mike. Have a great day.
Andrew DiCecco, everybody, here from InsideTheBirds.com. And, of course, football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill.